guys, welcome back to exmolex. This week I want to talk to you about Pioneer Trek. If you were never a Mormon, you might not know what this is. And actually, I'm not 100% sure if it's done all over the world or if it's just a Utah thing. I actually think that they do it in other states, but I'm not sure how prominent it is. So if you are a Mormon and you were either from a different state other than Utah or from out of the country, let me know. So for everybody who doesn't know what it is, basically it's where you take a bunch of teenagers, 14 to 18, out into the middle of nowhere during the summer for 3 or 4 days, and you go on a pioneer trek where everybody dresses up like pioneers. So it's like mid-1800s fashion. You pull a hand cart with all of your stuff in it with like another little family, and you try to get the pioneer experience and appreciate what the pioneers went through. So I'm going to go through my experience step by step and kind of talk about the things that happened and how I felt and all of that stuff. And keep in mind that this is just my personal Pioneer Trek experience. Not everybody's is the same. This is also probably 12 years ago, and I didn't keep a journal or anything about it. So this is just the best of my memory. So keep that in mind. So for my trek, I lived in Utah, and they took us to the middle of nowhere. Like I said, it was summer, really hot. It was probably June or July, and you had to wear pioneer clothes. So a friend of mine was actually a seamstress, and she made the clothes for me. I don't have them anymore, and I only have one picture, and you can't really see them. Kind of a bummer. But you had to have the bonnet, skirt, long sleeves, everything. And then you were allowed to wear like hiking boots underneath. Another big part of it was that you weren't allowed to go by your real name. So our ma and pa, they made up their own fake names. And then for all of the kids, they wanted you, if you were related to any pioneers, to do research and use one of the names of your like pioneer ancestors. And then if you didn't, you just had to pick a name that was like from that time period. So my pioneer name was Eliza. I don't think I'm even related to an Eliza, but I think I said I was because I liked the name and I didn't want to have to go by something I didn't like. So I was Eliza, everybody else had pioneer names, and we had to call each other by that. And that was kind of weird too, because a lot of the kids I knew from school, so I knew their actual name, but we weren't allowed to use our actual names. One of the rules was that you were not allowed to bring any electronics or any makeup, basically anything like 21st century. So they piled everybody into cars and they drove us all out to the middle of nowhere wearing our pioneer stuff, carrying our one bag, because you couldn't bring very much because we had to like put it on the hand carts and pull it by ourselves. So you had like a weight limit and couldn't bring very much stuff. So we get there, and they're going to split you into groups with ma's and pa's, which is what you called like the mom and dad of the families. Everybody is split into individual families. So I think it was ma and pa, and then it was 3 or 4 boys and girls each. So 4 boys, 4 girls, or 3 boys, 3 girls, something like that. And you were like a little family. Here's a picture of me and my family on trek with our hand cart. I'll blur all their faces, of course, because you never know who would be upset about being on the internet. When we got there and we gathered into our groups of families, the ma and pa would go through your bag and make sure that you didn't pack any makeup, make sure that you didn't pack any electronics. And yeah, it felt super, super invasive. I didn't pack any of that stuff because I didn't want to get in trouble and I didn't want them to take it away. But I do know a lot of other kids did bring that kind of stuff and they did get it taken away. And it did feel uncomfortable because I think at the time I went, I was probably 15 or 16 and had been wearing makeup for a few years and having to go with absolutely none around all of these other kids that were my age that I went to school with. At the time, I was pretty insecure about it and I did feel pretty uncomfortable. So after they went through our bags and made sure that we didn't bring anything we weren't allowed to, we packed everything up onto the hand carts, and then it was time to start pulling them. I am not 100% sure how far we actually went with the hand carts, but it was, in the mountains. So up and down hills, really rocky, and it felt like we went a long ways. So we started off in the morning and we went all day. I think we might have had a lunch before we left, so maybe it was more like the afternoon, but it was super, super hot outside. And I think we stopped for one break and maybe like had a little snack or something. And then we kept walking all day long. I feel like for most of the time that we pulled that I can remember, we just sang hymns, and obviously a lot of pioneer hymns because you want to keep with the spirit of the thing. So we went all day. It starts to get dark and everybody's exhausted. Like, when are we going to get there? We've been going all day. And I remember the adults just being like, no, we're getting close. We're almost there. It's almost over, blah, 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 the whole time. So we're expecting like, okay, we'll be there soon. And we keep not being there. We're not there. We're not there. We're not there. And finally, it's like really starting to get dark and we stop. And none of the adults would tell us, like, are we going to make camp? Are we stopping? When are we going to eat? Because at this point we were all starving. It was after dark in the summer. So it's probably like 8, 9 o'clock and nobody's eaten. Everybody's tired. And so I remember we stayed in this area just sitting there waiting for something to happen for, I mean, it felt like forever, probably at least 30 minutes, maybe longer. And finally, the adults are like, okay, now it's time to gather up the men, all the young men. And we didn't really know what was going on. And so they gathered up all the young men and they left. And then they're telling us, all the young women, so this part is where the young men have to go and serve in the Mormon battalion. And you guys have to pull the handcarts by yourselves for this next part. And first of all, we were like, we're still going? I thought we were stopping. Like, when are we eating? We were so hungry. We're so tired. And they were like, I mean, we thought we were done. We thought we were going to go to sleep for the night. But no, so we have to pick up our handcarts and keep going, except for now it's just the women. And I remember, I mean, it was a lot heavier without having everybody there to help. And a lot of it was uphill as well. And so I don't know exactly what they had the guys doing the whole time while we were pulling, but they left ahead of us. And then we probably went for at least another hour. And then towards the like end of it, they started having the guys come back, but they weren't allowed to pull with us. They would just like walk beside you and like whisper words of encouragement. It was really, really weird. I do remember there was this one part where we're going uphill and I was breathing heavily because I was tired. And one of the guys just like puts his hand on my shoulder. And I was like, oh my God. I was so tired and so hungry at this point that it was just like, I didn't even care. We get to the top of the hill and then the guys are allowed to start pulling again and we're still not done. Like, I'm like, when are we stopping? Like, we should have eaten by now. I think after the guys joined us, we only went for a little bit longer and then we get to a river and they're like, okay, all that we have to do and we'll be done tonight is we got to cross the river. And everybody is kind of like, well, I mean, it's freezing cold at this point. Once the sun goes down, we're in the mountains, the water is freezing. So what they have us do is the young men would carry the young women across and then go back and get the hand carts. And first of all, it was really uncomfortable to be carried by people. For me at the time, I was super uncomfortable with myself. I was super worried about being too heavy and it made me feel ick. I did not like it, but it was like that or walk through the water myself. And I didn't want to be freezing cold. I have this long skirt on. So I let them carry me across. They carried everybody across. And then the young men started pulling the hand carts across. And for my family, that went fine. We got our hand cart. But I do remember that when they were carrying one of the carts across the river, somebody's sleeping bag fell off the cart and into the water. Obviously soaked it. I never ended up finding out what they did to try to fix that because one of the kids now doesn't have a sleeping bag. I assume they figured something out, but I never heard what it was. So we're finally in our place where we're going to camp and we're like starving, so hungry. And they made beef broth. And that's it. We didn't get anything except for broth. And I remember being so hungry, so tired. And at that point, I mean, the broth felt amazing, but it's not filling in any way. It's just like flavored water. And of course, they're having you like, we have to pray over the food. And then when you go to sleep, you had to pray with your family, blah, blah, blah. The way they had us sleep. So there were no tents. You had to sleep under the stars. And it was like the ma and pa would sleep next to each other. And then the young men would sleep next to the pa. And the young women would sleep next to the ma. You're all on like a tarp, just like all squeezed next to each other with no tent. At that point, I was so tired and hungry and exhausted that I didn't care. So I just snuggled up and went to sleep. Of course, they got us up early in the morning. I don't know how late we were up that night, but it was dark for a long time while we were still awake. And like I said, this is in the middle of the summer. I mean, we had to have been up at least to 11 or 12 at night. Then they get us up early, and at this point, everybody was like dreading it because of how long we had to pull the day before. We were all convinced that we were gonna, be pulling all day again. We were not into it. But luckily, we probably pulled for another 30 minutes, if that, and we were at our next campsite. So we get there, and they had like all sorts of activities and stuff. We started out by like making our little camp area, and they were all like separated but close to each other. And, of course, no tent or anything. So it's mostly just an area for you to set your stuff. But they had all these activities set up. And personally, for me, this was the best part of Trek. They had like, you could make candles. So they had like this wax station where you would make candles. They had like axe throwing and knife throwing. There were other stations. I think there might have been like an archery station, just stuff like that. And I had a lot of fun doing that. They didn't make us stay with our families the whole time, so I got to see some of my friends, and it was really fun. Still exhausted after that day, though. And then the food that they had us eat was all, like, they had no, like, fruit snacks or anything like that. It was like, okay, you have an apple and some jerky and, food that they would have had back then kind of thing. I think we stayed there. We got there in the morning. We stayed there all day, slept that night, and stayed there for part of the next day. But the thing we did at nighttime, this next part is weird, okay? So we're there all day doing the different activities, and then they were like, okay, tonight we're gonna get together with everybody and have a big square dance. And I was like, cool, like, that sounds fun. I would love to do that. But they were like, everybody needs to get dressed into like, and so you like look nice. So put on your other pair of clothes, your like nicer pair, still Pioneer clothes, but the ones that aren't dirty. And everybody's gonna go wash up in the river. But they had the young men wash the young women's hair. I'm not sure why. It was super, super awkward. The guy that did mine is somebody that I'd known since like 3rd grade, but we weren't like good friends. He was just a person that was in my classes. Oh my God, it was the most awkward thing in my life. And he'd never done it before, obviously. So I'm like trying to explain to him. I've got my head like thrown over and he's washing my long hair. It was one of the weirdest experiences of my life. And I still to this day do not understand. But we did that. We washed up in the river. The young men washed the young women's hair and we got ready for this big dance. The dance, actually super fun. I love dancing and especially like square dancing and stuff. It was a good time. I enjoyed that. Starts to get dark. We get done doing that. And then it was time to go back to our campsites. They had a little fires set up for us. And I wasn't really good friends with anybody in my family. I knew some of them, but not well. And the family that was right next to ours had one of my best friends in it. So I wanted to go hang out with them. And they let me for like 20 minutes and we were playing games over there. And then my family, my ma, is like, Eliza, come over here. And I was like, what? And she's like, we're going to sleep now. And I was like, oh, well, I'm like 15 feet away. Can I just stay up and play with my friends? And she's like, no, you need to stay with us. I remember being super, super annoyed by that, being like, okay. So yeah, that was kind of annoying. So the next morning we pack up everything, put it on the handcart again. And I remember them specifically, my pa being like, oh, it's not very much farther. Like it's not very much farther and we'll be back. And then that was it. Like our parents were going to pick us up from wherever we got done. And so everybody was super excited and we start pulling and it's like an hour goes by, 2 hours goes by and we're still pulling. And all of the adults had kept saying like, oh, it's really close. We don't have to go nearly as far as before. Like we'll be there soon, blah, blah, blah. And it just kept going and kept going and kept going. And everybody at this point, I mean, we've been out in the sun. We're exhausted. We're so tired. We haven't been getting enough to eat, let's be honest. And we're all just dirty and ready to go home. And we had to keep pulling. I mean, that felt like it took several more hours. And I remember being really, really sore at that point. And they wanted us to like sing a song that they made up. And it was to the tune of Journey's Don't Stop Believing. And it was like, don't stop pulling or something. I don't remember all of the lyrics. I don't remember hardly any of it, but I remember being like, this is really dumb. But they made us practice it while we were pulling the handcart. We're out of breath singing the song. And then they were like, when we get to your parents, I want you all to sing it. And we were like, okay, like, we're gonna do it. Hopefully they like it. And we finally get there several hours later and we all start singing it, but all the parents were clapping and like applauding. And so they couldn't hear us and we couldn't even really hear ourselves. So it just like petered out and we didn't do the song. So all in all, there were fun parts about Trek. I enjoyed the activities they had us do and I really enjoyed the dance. But it felt like an invasion of privacy for them to go through your stuff at the beginning. It felt weird to not be able to go by your own name. It made me feel uncomfortable to not be able to do my hair or makeup the way I wanted to. Right now in my life, I feel like that wouldn't bother me as much, but when I was like 15, 16, yeah, it bothered me. The guys washing the girls' hair was really weird, and I still don't understand what the purpose of that was, and I did not like it. Did I get a feel of what it was like to be a pioneer? I mean, I guess temporarily. I'm sure that they were hungry a lot. I'm sure that they were tired a lot. I'm sure that it wasn't fun for them. Now, with the knowledge I have about the church, it honestly just makes me so sad to think about what those people went through for something that was all a lie. I was a pioneer for 2 days and I was miserable for a lot of it. And you know, I did it for my belief's sake, the way they did, but it's sad because these people were just 100% convinced and superstitious of something that is just not true. Joseph Smith wasn't the person that they told me he was. I don't feel like the pioneers were stupid people. I've heard some people criticize them for being dumb, and that's not how I feel. I really do feel like they were doing what they thought was right, because that's what I did growing up my whole life. I was a Mormon. I went on Pioneer Trek. I believed that what I was doing was right. I really, truly thought that my religion was the only truth. It just makes me feel sad for what the people went through. So I'm curious if you guys have any Trek horror stories. There were things that I heard about happening. Didn't happen with my company, but I did hear about other companies having problems with, like, oh, a kid got a sprained ankle, but we're out in the middle of nowhere with no vehicles and we don't have a way to help them. So let me know. What weird stuff happened? Also, super, super curious. Did other people have your mas and pas, one, go through your stuff? Did you have to go by a different name? And did they make the young men wash the young women's hair? Did that happen? Like, is that just a weird thing we did, or did other people do that? So I hope you enjoyed hearing about this story. I know this is a pretty informal video, but I'm feeling like crap this week and I didn't feel like doing anything other than a story time. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much to my patrons for your support. I really, really appreciate it. And a special thank you to @Keegar and Jake Nunyabiz for supporting at the Demon tier on my Patreon. I love you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, share. Remember to find me on all my other social media, and you can find links to support the channel in the description as well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.